Hello and welcome to A Patient God, a series on an oft-overlooked characteristic of God, his patience. If there's anything that we need in our current culture, in our current climate, it's God's patience with us and some godly patience from ourselves to others. Unless noted, all references are from the World English Bible, which I picked because it is reasonably modern sounding and carries no copyright restrictions. Let's get started. For many years, I was a software developer. And as I watched projects develop, or efforts within projects develop, they kind of there were three stages to it. The first stage was where everything was new, everything was exciting, and everything seemed easy. The second stage is when you start to learn about things and problems start to crop up, and it goes from being easy to being impossible. All you see are obstacles. Then in the third and hopefully longest stage, you settle down and you work through it. You fix the problems, you work through the issues, and you find that in truth, the thing you were doing was neither as easy as it looked at first, nor as impossible as it looked after that. If there's one constant in our world, it's change. And change can mean many things. It can mean changing what we're doing, changing in how we go about doing something we already do, something that is a real easy modification. Maybe you take a different turn on your way to work, or just something real easy. And most of us are okay with that. We adjust and we're fine. A little bit harder is a new habit. Something, that they say takes 3 weeks to learn a habit. And if you're talking about weight loss or exercise, it usually takes longer than that to actually it takes some effort to continue making a change like that. But if it's a good goal and we feel motivated to do it, that kind of change doesn't come easy, but it's certainly doable. Then you get into something that's rather life-changing. Maybe you get an awesome new job and it's a change that you're really excited about. Or maybe that same job forces you to move somewhere you've never been before. And then that's a bigger adjustment. Maybe you do it because you feel like you have to, or maybe you want to make some changes like this. But it's a much bigger adjustment. Then, of course, we come to 2020. Now, I'm not going to get into mask, no mask, social distancing, no social distancing, but simply point out that whatever we had planned in 2020, the reality was a lot different than we expected. Lockdowns and quarantines and reduced capacity, even whatever we were planning to do, this was not it. And that brought a lot of change and a lot of anxiety on us. And that brings us to Moses. So if I took a piece of paper and I plotted the changes we're talking about from super easy and quick to 2020 and your world turns upside down, the change Moses is asked to make in Exodus chapter 3 is somewhere in the next county. I mean, it's nowhere near this paper, because God asks him not just to turn his life upside down, but it's a new career. It's a move into politics. It's suddenly becoming a leader. It's all kinds of change all rolled up into one. And as we go through, I think we'll see Moses we'll see Moses dealing with this change as best he can. And in fact, we'll see God helping him deal with this change and not simply saying, Moses, go lead Israel out of Egypt, but helping him along in that practice. So just some fair warning. I have a perspective on the interaction between Moses and God in Exodus 3 and 4. It may well not be what you're used to hearing, but I'll explain why I think this way, and you're welcome to take it or leave it. The good news is that no matter if you believe Moses is simply a whiner, or if you think that God is guiding Moses through this, the conclusions that we reach in the end are the same. God shows patience with Moses as Moses comes to grips with a new situation, a total change in his life. So let's set the stage. In Exodus 2, we see the early and middle parts of Moses' life. He grows up in Pharaoh's family. If you know the story of how Moses was put in a basket and put in the river and then found by Pharaoh's daughter, you know that Moses had the benefit of both a secular upbringing in Pharaoh's house as well as some instruction from his mother who became his nurse. So at 40 years old, Moses, as we're getting further into chapter 2 of Exodus, he goes out and sees his people. And he seems to think, if you look at Acts 7, he seems to think that killing an Egyptian is a good way to start a revolution, to start getting the children of Israel out from Egyptian bondage. Spoiler alert, it's not. The thing becomes known, it becomes known to Pharaoh, and Moses has to hightail it out of there, out to the land of Midian. And in the land of Midian, he spends his next 40 years as a sheep herder. From the tip of luxury in Pharaoh's house to a very nomadic life. Probably a fairly lonely life lots of the time. Along the way, he marries and he has a son. Now he is 80 years old and he has spent half his life herding sheep. And that's where we see him. That's where we're going to pick up the story. Another fair warning. I'm quoting, as I said, from the World English Bible. There are two quirks, not serious ones, but ones just to be aware of. The first is that where most translations will say the Lord for God's name, for Jehovah, the World English Bible says Yahweh. So just be aware of that. It's not a big deal. Something else that might throw you a bit when you first hear it is that the World English Bible uses contractions. I'll tell you from personal experience, the first time I read a contraction probably was where God was saying something. I'll go, wait a minute, that can't be right. It's like, well, it's a translation, so there are multiple ways to translate the same Hebrew text into English, and this is just a choice that they made to, I guess, sound a bit more conversational, modern looking, whatever. So let's pick up in Exodus 3 and verse 1. Now Moses was keeping the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the back of the wilderness and came to God's mountain, to Horeb. Yahweh's angel appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the middle of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. Moses said, I will go now and see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. Now I'm going to keep the sound of fire going for just a little while, because what comes up is going to be, I don't know if you want to call it a right angle turn or a 180 or a series of right turns or 180s, but Moses is going to have a lot on his mind. It begins with seeing this bush that is burning but is not burned up. And I want to give us just a tiny bit of the sense of the turmoil that's probably going through his mind as we continue through the story. Now, verses 4 through 6. When Yahweh saw that he came over to see, this is Moses coming over to see, God called to him out of the middle of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. He said, Here I am. He said, Don't come close. Take off your sandals, for the place you're standing is on holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Like I said, there's probably turmoil. You see a bush that is burning but isn't being burnt up, and then you hear a voice saying you're standing on holy ground. Take off your sandals. I can't imagine what Moses is thinking right now, and it's about to get worse. Let's keep going. Verses 7 through 10. Yahweh said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and large land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite. Now behold, the cry of the children of Israel has come to me. Moreover, I have seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come now, therefore, and I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. So if the goings on in the first 6 verses of chapter 3 aren't enough, God introduces his plan for Moses. And that plan is, you're going to go to Pharaoh, and you are going to tell him to let my people go, and you're going to bring the people of Israel and come out of Egypt. Now, Moses, of course, has a choice to make. Does he like this idea or doesn't he? But I'll suggest to you that this is a false choice that we're trying to give Moses. It's not an either or. Either I accept it wholeheartedly or I say no and reject it. There's definitely a middle ground here. Moses could have said, nope, sorry, can't do it. Or he could have said, yes, let's go. But he doesn't do either of those things. He doesn't reject it out of hand, but he doesn't just blindly accept what God has told him. He needs some more information. And to my mind, that's completely fair. God has asked him to do something totally different. And so Moses asks a question. Verse 11. Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? Now, 40 years before this, when Moses was still in Egypt, this wouldn't be such a silly question. This Egyptian-trained, Israel-loving person thought, apparently, from what we read in Acts 7, that maybe he could lead the children of Israel out of Egypt. Maybe he could start a revolution. But we're 40 years past that now. 40 years where he's been presumably cut off from Israel, from his people. And what he's known is his wife, his son, and his father-in-law, and the sheep, and whoever else happens to be in the land of Midian. So I find this a fair question. God asks you to do something. Well, wait, who am I? Why are you asking me to do this? Who am I to do such a thing? And God doesn't get angry at this point. He answers the question. Verse 12. He said, this is God speaking, certainly I will be with you. This will be the token to you that I have sent you. When ye have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. God doesn't come back with, that's a dumb question, Moses. Of course you're the right person. No, he gives Moses some more information. In fact, he gives him a goal beyond just you're going to lead the people out of Egypt. He says, you're going to lead the people of Egypt right back here, right to this mountain, and you're going to worship me here, which of course is exactly what happens. But God doesn't get upset with him. Now, this isn't enough for Moses. He turns right around and asks another question. Verse 13. Moses said to God, behold, when I come to the children of Israel and tell them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What should I tell them? This one I'm not quite sure why he asked God this. The Israelites know God, and he knew God. God already told him, I'm the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, your fathers. I wonder here if Moses is asking God for something so that Moses can show that this is the same God that the Israelites know that he's coming from, that he's not just a random prophet from a random God saying, I'm going to deliver you. Kind of like the scams that, oh, send me some money and I'm going to free up a whole lot of money and give it back to you. That this is some, I need to prove that I'm not a scam artist, perhaps. And if you were Israel and this guy who you probably didn't know very much at all because he grew up in Pharaoh's house and has been gone for 40 years, if you even knew him, you've probably forgotten him, comes over and says, I'm going to lead you out of Egypt. God sent me. You're probably going to be skeptical. And so he asks the question, and God replies. Verses 14 through 22 now. God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, you shall tell the children of Israel this, I am has sent me to you. God said moreover to Moses, you shall tell the children of Israel this, Yahweh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial to all generations. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and tell them, Yahweh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I have surely visited you and seen that which is done to you in Egypt. I have said, I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite, to a land flowing with milk and honey. They will listen to your voice. You shall come, you and the elders of Israel, to the king of Egypt, and you shall tell him, Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Now please let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to Yahweh our God. I know that the king of Egypt won't give you permission to go, no, not by a mighty hand. I will reach out my hand and strike Egypt with all my wonders which I will do among them, and after that he will let you go. I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and it will happen that when you go, you shall not go empty-handed. But every woman shall ask of her neighbor and of her who visits her house jewels of silver, jewels of gold, and clothing. You shall put them on your sons and on your daughters. You shall plunder the Egyptians. So God doesn't just directly answer the question. I mean, he does by saying, I am who I am, revealing this name that I am the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, that this is the name of the one who is sending you. But he gives Moses some more detail as well. Says you're going to go to the elders. They're going to listen to you. You're going to go to Pharaoh. He is not going to listen to you. And I'm going to punish Egypt. And then you're going to go and on the way out, you're going to ask your neighbors for jewels, gold and silver, and they're going to give it to you. You're going to plunder the Egyptians on your way out. And then, as he said before, you're going to come back to this mountain and worship me. So rather than saying, Moses, this is a dumb question, he not only answers the question, but he gives him more detail. He's working with Moses, I believe, to help Moses get used to this, what would have been a crazy idea just moments before. He's helping Moses get used to this idea. So we move into chapter 4. Moses has another question. Verse 1, Moses answered, but behold, they will not believe me, nor listen to my voice, for they will say, Yahweh has not appeared to you. Now, truly, I can't fault Moses for this. Again, at this point, he's got the name of God, some words to tell the people, the elders, and to Pharaoh, and he's told that God will be with him. But if I were in the place of the Israelites, I think I would want some more proof than some guy with a name for God and some fancy words saying, come on, we're going to get out of Egypt. We're going to end all of this slavery that you've been on for all these many years. So God answers him. Verses 2 through 9. Yahweh said to him, what is that in your hand? He said, a rod. He said, throw it on the ground. Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a snake, and Moses ran away from it. Yahweh said to Moses, stretch out your hand and take it by the tail. He stretched out his hand and took hold of it, and it became a rod in his hand. This is so that they may believe that Yahweh, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. Yahweh said furthermore to him, now put your hand inside your cloak. He put his hand inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous, as white as snow. He said, put your hand inside your cloak again. He put his hand inside his cloak again, and when he took it out of his cloak, behold, it had turned again as his other flesh. It will happen, if they will not believe you or listen to the voice of the first sign, that they will believe the voice of the latter sign. It will happen, if they will not believe even these two signs or listen to your voice, that you shall take of the water of the river and pour it on the dry land. The water which you take out of the river will become blood on the dry land. This is in fact what Moses and Aaron will do when they reach the elders, and it will work. Show them the signs, and they will believe him. But Moses isn't quite done yet. Verse 10, Moses said to Yahweh, O Lord, I am not eloquent, neither before now, nor since you have spoken to your servant, for I am slow of speech and of a slow tongue. Now we're getting a little more into the realm of excuses, I think. But here's Moses saying, I don't think I'm up to it. And maybe he's just bringing the first thing that comes to mind. I can't speak very well. God replies to him and still shows some patience. He's not gotten upset yet. Verses 11 and 12. Yahweh said to him, Who made man's mouth? Or who makes one mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Isn't it I, Yahweh? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak. So God answers him, Don't worry about it. I made your mouth. I made everything that's here. I can make you well-spoken if I want to. And apparently something like this happens because as we get further into the story of Moses and Pharaoh and Moses and the children of Israel, we get to the point where Moses is speaking to the people directly with apparently no trouble with his speech. But I can imagine Moses at this point being, okay, I can't do this. And that's were I in his shoes, I think I would be saying something similar. There's no way I can do this. So in verse 13, Moses said, Oh Lord, please send someone else. He's asked his questions and God has answered his questions. They seem to have a reasonable dialogue going. The questions Moses is asking are reasonable ones and God is giving him reasonable answers. Now to you and me today, they may not be reasonable because we're not expected to do miracles anymore, but they were reasonable for the time. But now God's patience runs out. Let's read verses 14 through 17. Yahweh's anger burned against Moses, and he said, What about Aaron, your brother, the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Also, behold, he is coming out to meet you. When he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth. I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you what you shall do. He will be your spokesman to the people. It will happen that he will be to you a mouth, and you will be to him as God. You shall take this rod in your hand, with which you shall do the signs. So now God has said enough. You need to go. This discussion is over. But he doesn't end the discussion with, Stop it, Moses, go. He says, okay, I'm going to provide for you here too. I'm sending Aaron to you. And we see later, we're not going to read it, but we see that Aaron is told by God to go out and meet Moses. And so they meet in the wilderness. And it's just come to the point where God is saying it's time to go. You are ready. You are the person that I want. You can do this. And it's time to go. And apparently that's enough for Moses. And to be fair, sometimes you need a kick in the rear end to get you on your way to say, no, okay, it's time to go. We've asked questions. We've settled some things. It's time to get started. So Moses does. He goes and he gets started. So what do we see about God here? What can we learn about God's patience here? And just as important, how can we have that kind of patience with others? First of all, let me suggest that God didn't simply say, do this, and leave it at that. We'll see this again in Acts 10 when God persuades Peter that it's okay for him to go and speak to Gentiles. We don't see, in either case, we don't see God saying, go do it, and then just sitting back and waiting for them to do it. God allows Moses to ask his questions, to think through what's going on, and God gives him answers. In fact, he gives him more answer than Moses asked question at times. giving him details about here is exactly what's going to happen, and which is, of course, exactly what did happen. Now, of course, you and I, living on this side of the cross and this side of the completion of God's revelation, we don't always get to see the why. We don't get to question God directly like this, like Moses was able to. But with a lot of things, God gives us more than just the command, go do it. He gives us at least some insight as to why, the kinds of insights that we in our limited understanding can understand. Take, for example, baptism. Now, I don't know all the ins and outs and how exactly everything works in there, and I doubt you do either. But God did more than say, go be baptized for the remission of your sins. In 1 Peter 3, he compares baptism to Noah and how water saved Noah and the 7 others in his family, and how baptism in a like manner now saves us. Not that we're just becoming clean physically, washing dirt off of ourselves, but that we are asking God for a good conscience, or depending on the translation, we are responding with a good conscience to God. It gives us some of the idea of this is not just washing, this is washing away your sins like you might cleanse your body. This is cleansing your soul. So that's one thing. Something else is that God understands. I don't think we give God enough credit here. God understands when a task is difficult for us. Something that we don't understand at first, or that we need some time to get our heads around. For example, God asks us, of course, to repent, be baptized, and to follow after him. Now, that following after him, he doesn't expect us to be perfect right away. He didn't expect the people of the first century to be perfect right away. We see it as early as Acts 2, where they continue with each other, with the apostles. And they keep learning, they keep meeting together, they keep socializing, they keep doing all of these things together as they're growing together. That God doesn't expect us to ever be perfect, as far as I can tell. I certainly hope not, because I'm far from perfect now. Even though I've been a Christian for many years, I'm far from perfect. And that's something I know I need to reflect towards others. When I ask someone to do something new and different, I shouldn't expect someone to understand immediately everything that I'm telling him. I need to have some patience, let them work through it, let them learn, as perhaps I had to learn the same thing before, and work through it. The third thing is we see that God does answer questions. Now again, we don't have that direct conversation with God, but we can ask him questions in prayer and get some level of response. And we see that Moses here, God answered every question, even when God got upset with Moses, got angry with him. He still answered his question and say, okay, I'll give you Aaron. That's fine. God does not leave us without answers. Now, we may not answer every possible question or understand every little thing, like we said about baptism. I don't understand everything about baptism, but I understand enough to understand why I need to do it and why it's important. And we see God answering questions elsewhere. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul has a thorn in the flesh, and 3 times he begs God to take it away from him. And God eventually says no, but he says, why? And he didn't get upset at Paul for asking the question, for begging for it. He simply says, this is why I gave it to you. And Paul accepts that. We see in James 1 and verse 5 that God is ready and willing to give us wisdom if we ask for wisdom. If there's things we don't understand, we can go to God and say, I don't understand this. Will you please help me to understand this? And God, through his word, through the people around us, through our faith and acceptance of what he says, will give us that wisdom, will help us to understand things. And we need to have that as well. When we ask someone to do something new, like be baptized, which for a lot of people for most people in this world, is something completely foreign, to be immersed in water, that may take a little getting used to. They may have some questions. They probably will have some questions, and that's fine. We can be like God when we answer those questions and patiently walk through someone's issues with them. And fourth, I think we do need to recognize that God's patience has its limits. There's a finite quality to it. But at the same time, God's patience, I believe, is a lot longer than we tend to give him credit for. He worked with Moses so long as Moses was asking good questions, reasonable questions, questions that helped Moses understand. He got upset when Moses said, "I can't do it, send somebody else." And I know I need that same level of understanding and patience when someone is asking me questions. As long as someone is trying to understand what's going on, trying to understand what I'm teaching them, I can be patient. At least I hope I can. I need to be patient and answer the questions. Maybe it's someone who is newer in the faith and a concept comes up that they don't understand yet, or a story is mentioned that they don't know yet, and they ask a question. They're being reasonable. They don't know what we're talking about. And so it's only fair, it's only patient, it's only godly to answer that question with patience. Now, if someone gets to the point where they're just messing around, or they're trying to duck out of doing something, or it's clear that they are not serious anymore, that these questions aren't genuine anymore, then an ending of patience makes some sense, because that's what God did here. Our God is an incredible God. He knows us better than we know ourselves, and he knows how to lead us to the green pastures and still waters of Psalm 23. You see that with Moses. By the end of Moses' life, some 40 years after this point, he seems completely comfortable as a leader of God's people. He is not in chaos and confusion anymore. He is calm with where God takes him. Let's not shorten God's patience. Neither his patience with us nor the patience we have with each other should be shortened. For our God is a patient God, and we need that kind of patience in our lives today. Thank you for joining me today. A Patient God is written, recorded, and produced by me, Eric Peterson. I'm a member of the Campbell Road Church of Christ. We'd love you to join us whenever you're in the Dallas area. To learn more about us, please visit our website, www.thebibleway, all one word together, .com. The music was recorded at our annual singing in 2018. The song is Wonderful Story of Love by J.M. Driver. See you next time.